Hey guys, thanks for entering the chamber once again. Today we're going to be breaking open these new Toga Clash decks, and we're going to go over kind of how to use it to start playing UniVersus. This video is going to be aimed at players that are new to UniVersus, and maybe even kind of new to card games in general. It'll assume that you know the basics of how to play the game, but that's really about it. Before we begin, I want to remind everybody that I'm actually currently doing a giveaway for the new set, Jetburn. There's a link down in the description below, but basically, just go check that video out of me opening my 2 free boxes of Jetburn, courtesy of UVS Games, and like and subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment on the box opening video on what you're most excited about with Jetburn, and you'll be entered into a giveaway for an option to win one of those boxes in that box opening video. With that out of the way, let's get into this video. Here in front of us, you see we have 2 copies of the brand new Toga structure deck, or the Clash deck. Now, if you're brand new and you only ended up buying 1 copy, most of what I'm going to cover in this video will still apply to you, but I'm going to be assuming you have 2 copies for play sets of every card for a couple of things we're going to go over. If you do only have 1 copy of this Clash deck, I would recommend buying a second just to get play sets of every card, but there's nothing wrong with starting the game with just 1. To kick this off, let's actually crack these open. As you can see, we now have our 2 50-card decks, and along with a couple of playmats that I don't have featured in this video, and each of them is also going to come with this basically learn to play guide you can scan with a QR code, and it takes you to a really good video that teaches the basics how to play if you're brand new. The backside also helps you get set up on the UGN app, and if you're new and you're seeing this, make sure to mention my channel, The Chamber, when you're signing up on the UGN app, and as long as you actually play the game and go to a couple events, you'll actually get some free points. UniVersus has this whole system where you can get points by turning in spare packs, playing in events, even attending locals. You can even just register like a kitchen top game with your friends, and it'll still give you those points. You can then redeem those points for promos. So by signing all of this up, you'll get a free 50 points right off the gate, which is enough to redeem 1 promo of your choice. So if you're brand new to this, you really want to make sure you take advantage of this. We're going to take these 2 50-card Toga decks and we're going to blend them together into 1 50-card deck that's a little bit more powerful, kind of taking the best of both worlds. If you only have 1 Toga deck, you should feel free to skip to the next section in this video. There's going to be a timestamp included. Now, if you're still here, the deck build we're going to put together today is just my suggestion, but if you want to try other cards, you should feel free to do that. Part of the experience of playing any card game is doing your own deck building after all. So, each Clash deck comes with a grand total of 19 attacks, which is a little beefy for our purposes. Generally, you want decks to have around, we're going to set those aside for a sec, you want decks to have around 30% attacks, which in a 50-card deck would be 15, but this has 19. 10, 15, and then we have these 4 extra here. So there's a lot of attacks in this 50-card deck. So one of our main focuses is going to be kind of trimming on the number of attacks that we're playing, while also increasing the card quality of the attacks that we do choose to play. I'm going to suggest you start with 17 attacks, which is 34%, but you should feel free to bump that number up or down based on your personal preferences. To start, we want to look at the attacks we want to play 4 copies of. These are all cards that we basically need to see for our deck to function. And I say need deliberately. Need is a very important word there. One of the basics of deck building is kind of learning to differentiate between things you need and things that you want. Cards that you need are things that, as the name would suggest, you need to see for your character to function and kind of do their thing. They're typically the best cards in your deck. First, we have here 4 copies of Sudden Stab. Sudden Stab is probably the best attack, at least for us in this structure deck, starting out. Not only is it a 5 mid for 5, so it's very stat efficient, since the average stat is around 4 speed for 5 damage, so it's a little on the fast side, but also comes with 2 really good enhances. The fact that we get a +1 to play our next attack if our opponent sticks a block on this move means that if they full block it, we can play a second attack without accruing too much progressive difficulty, which is really important when we get to kind of how Toga functions. She's a very low risk character. In addition to that, this card also allows us to draw a card if it's the first card that we play for the turn. And card draw is basically always useful, both for building out our stage, finding more attacks, defending ourselves. It's a very important thing to have, as in any other card game. Next, we have a playset of Twirling Needle. Now, Needle is interesting because it always counts as being our first attack played, which means that we can play it later in a string and still use our character, as she gives a 3 speed and 2 damage bonus to the first attack that we play, but because Twirling Needle always counts as our first attack, we can always give it that bonus. So for us, this is a 4 difficulty, 6 high for 6 basically, and as I said earlier, with 4 speed for 5 being kind of the average, this makes this move very stat efficient. It also can conditionally give our next attack speed too, so it's just an all-around excellent card for us. Easy 4 of. Now from here, we're going to look at some attacks that we want. I've got them right here in my hand. And the keyword here is want. These aren't attacks that we need to see for our deck to function, but they are cards that help our deck function. To start, we're going to play 3 copies of Leaping Slice. Leaping Slice is a very fast move, as it's effectively a 9-speed move if it's the first card that we play. And it also lets us discard a card, and then once this move hits, which it probably will at 9 speed, it then lets us draw another card. So when we're trying to find like a lethal hand, the ability to discard a foundation and then draw hopefully an attack off the top of our deck makes this like a good card for just like finding resources. It also comes with Stun 1, which in conjunction with our character's response means we can stun 2 cards as like a nice opener. So this is like a really decent card, but not one that we necessarily need to see. Next, we're playing 3 copies of Ambush Thrust. Thrust is only a 4 for 4, which is a little on the low side when it comes to attack stats, but it can conditionally give itself 3 more damage and become a 4 for 7, which is nice. But the important thing really about Thrust is the ability to just pick up anything from our momentum and put it in our hand. Because our character can add anything from our discard pile to our momentum, there's a bit of a, there's a couple steps involved with the process, but this just ends up grabbing any card we want from our discard pile directly into our hand, is effectively what it works out to. You can cycle attacks, you can find specific foundations that you're missing. This is just like an all-around great card for Toga. But you do already need some momentum, and the damage pump is a little conditional, so this is only a card we want to see, but we don't need to see it. And then finally, we're going to play 3 copies of Multi-Needle Puncture. Puncture is a little boring. It's a 3 for 5 that gets more damage if there's already a Multi-Needle Puncture in our discard pile, so it's really like a 3 for 7, so it's slow and has a lot of damage. But what's important is that it comes with EX3, which means we can discard momentum to give our attacks bonus speed. Every momentum will give us 3. So this is like a 7 damage move that we can put as much speed on it as we have momentum for. So if our opponent's low, you can literally just like jam a Multi-Needle Puncture out and put all your momentum in. And certainly when you're starting to play, that'll absolutely get you there, get you across the finish line. These add up to a nice clean 17 card attack package, as you can see here. Just gonna layer these out like so. At 17 cards, we're going to have room for 33 foundations. Now, going over the attacks, there's also some wiggle room on what attacks you play. You'll note that I didn't recommend her ultra rare attack. I don't personally think it's very good. But when you're building your own deck, like I said, you should feel free to experiment with different cards. Even things I did not recommend, you should play them yourself just to give them a shot. Now, as I was saying, with 17 attacks, you're going to be left with 33 slots left for a 50 card deck. The structure decks all come with 9 different foundations in various allotments. If we play 4 of all of those foundations, you have 36 foundations. So we really just need to trim a couple from there and we're good to go. For the most part, we're going to play 4 copies of every foundation. Instead of focusing on all the different foundations, since we're playing mostly 4 copies of all of them, I'm actually just going to talk about the 3 foundations we're each going to play 3 copies of. By trimming 3 foundations from 4 to 3, we remove 3 from the deck and we go from 36 to 33. And 33 and 17 makes a nice clean 50 cards for us. So first, I'm suggesting you should only play 3 copies of our ultra rare, abandoning all inhibition. This card's actually really good, but it's a 3 diff, which is a little invasive on deck spaces. You can't play too many 3s. And it's also unique, so you want to see it, but extra copies are duds, so 3 kind of just ends up being the right number. Speaking of 3s being, sticky, I'm also going to say you should play 3 copies of Weapon of Choice. You could play 4 if you wanted, as the commit to draw card is, it is very good, but the ability to discard momentum for a damage pump kind of becomes less useful over time, so I think you can get away with only playing 3 of this card, and again, you don't want to play too many 3s because they can get sticky. And then finally, I think you should only play 3 copies of Blood Sample. Sample's neat, but this lets you use a momentum to pick up a weapon that you've blocked with, basically. And that is valuable, but you don't want to throw all your momentum to effects like that, and it is a one-time use. I think you can just kind of comfortably trim this to 3. And also, it's a mid-block, and there's a lot of mid-blocks compared to highs and lows in the Clash deck, so you can kind of comfortably trim some mids as well. To briefly go over it, the other foundations, you play 4 Death Maneuvers, 4 Twisted Love, 4 Transformation Material, 4 Strange Friendship, 4 Dangerous Combatant, and 4 Blood Bank. And this makes for a nice clean 33 card deck. I'm sorry, I said 33 card deck. Makes for a nice clean 50 card deck, 33 foundations. Now, understanding the basic rules is the first step, but once you kind of know how the game is played, how do you understand the strategy behind the game? What kind of character is Toga exactly? Is she an offensive character? Is she a defensive character? How should you be playing your games? These are important questions you should be asking as a new player trying to pick this game up, assuming you're playing with Toga. I'm going to try to answer some of these and go over the basics of how kind of Toga 3 wants to function and how you'll play with this deck to help you get started playing games at your local friendly game store or with your friends. Out of the box, Toga 3 is what you would call a value-focused character. You can actually build this character a few different ways, but if you're starting out, this is going to be a character that focuses around value, which means accruing some kind of resource. It could be more cards, a bigger stage. In this case, it's about accruing momentum. Once you've accrued this resource, you then use that resource as a tool throughout the game to overwhelm your opponent on value. In the early game, her speed pump and damage pump, along with her ability to commit foundations when she plays weapons, makes it very hard for your opponent to actually block this character. You know, her opening move is 8 speed, 9 speed, and it comes with at least a single, committed foundation. A lot of the time, your opponents can't really block that, even though they're incentivized to. So they kind of just have to eat that opening attack, usually. When you hit with that opening attack, Toga's second response gives you a free momentum that you can then tuck away. And this is in addition to the momentum that you get just for connecting with an attack, since you can move the attack that dealt damage to your momentum at the end of the turn. Since getting a single hit gets you 2 momentum, you can pretty safely stop attacking from there and focus on building and defense, which is one of the little upsides to Toga. Is early game, she doesn't have to take a lot of risks. You can kind of like hop out, hit your opponent once, and then like hop back in. And you can do that like very safely. You don't have to play long strings. It's one of the appeals of this character. Now, over time, we're going to start accruing more and more momentum, and our opponent's going to start losing health. And there's going to come a point where they're kind of vulnerable with the remaining health total, and based off the amount of momentum that we have, at that point we can go in for the kill, ideally after our opponent commits a lot of resources trying to put damage on or even kill us first. You could do things like pick up fresh attacks with ambush thrust. That way you can, keep applying that pressure, play an attack, play an ambush thrust, grab an attack for momentum, play that attack next. You can get all these attacks in. You can also start using your momentum with weapon of choice and start applying damage, just giving all of your attacks bonus damage, since you can every turn or every attack you can discard a momentum and give it 3 damage over a long attack string that's going to add up. Or alternatively, if your opponent's very soft, you can just hit them with a multi-needle puncture, give it some damage, put all your momentum in it, and hit them for like a 15 speed move for like 8 or 9 damage, somewhere in that ballpark, and just take that last bit of health that they have remaining. Our second response really helps this playstyle because as we start playing all of these weapon attacks, over time, we're going to start committing more and more and more of our opponent's foundations. This isn't too scary if our opponent has a full stage and has some face downs and other kind of like easier foundations they can commit without worry. But if you go in and start playing these attacks after your opponent has committed most of their board, making them commit another 2, 3, 4 foundations can take away the last of their defense, making them pretty much, just defenseless with no abilities that they can play, which is very potent. If you take this kind of somewhat value-focused defensive playstyle with this deck out the gate, and really focus on getting momentum early and playing safe, and then overwhelming your opponent once you've accrued this value, a lot of momentum in her case, I think you're going to have a lot of success, at least starting out with this game with this character. That's everything you need to know to start playing Toga 3 at locals, but I am going to leave you with one last real quick suggestion before we sign off, and that's actually on sleeves. There's a lot of options available. Some people like katanas, some people will recommend KCIs. Your local store might recommend something different, but for me, I would actually recommend dragon shields. They come in a variety of colors. They tend to be very durable. They're a little pricey at $14, but they also come with a nice added perk. But the box that they come in also becomes a deck box for you after you sleeve your deck. So once you have your Clash deck and you get it sleeved up, you can buy some dragon shields and actually use this to keep your deck in until you buy a deck box of your own, which is a nice little upside. I think these are a great investment for if you really want to protect your cards for a long term. You know, $14 or $15 is a lot compared to a Clash deck, but if you stick with this and start upgrading the deck, this cost of $15 sleeves is rapidly going to pay itself back many times over for protecting your cards. That's going to wrap up my tutorial for playing Toga 3 out the box. If you're new to UniVersus, make sure you check out the description down below because I have a lot of other tools and resources for you. Other content creators, a link to the UGN app, a link to the giveaway, all of these kinds of things that you should be interested in as a new player. If you made it this far and you found this video useful, please consider liking and subscribing. Maybe leave me in the comments below if you have any questions, especially if you're like a newer player to the game. In the near future, I'm going to cover Ochako 4, just like I've covered Toga 3 here today, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. But for now, this is going to wrap us up. So, once again, thank you for entering the chamber, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.